In 1941, when the Germans started moving eastwards after having already occupied Western Poland, I was 9, my brother was 7. And the Ukrainians started persecuting the Jews, even before the Germans. And in fact, they killed 4,000 Jews. And then very soon, the Germans, the Nazis, started rounding up first the men. And my first experience seeing them was when I was in our flat with my mother and my brother. We had a flat on the 2nd floor, and I heard on our staircase what we used to call the Gestapo, the most cruel of the German. I believe they were part of the police, of the Nazi police, armed police, shouting and calling the Jews by very unpleasant names. And my father came running in and he said, "The Germans after me." And in order to escape, my mother locked the door and my father jumped from our 2nd floor balcony onto the 1st floor balcony and hid underneath. The Gestapo started banging at our door. My mother had to let them in. They didn't find my father and they left. Very soon we were told to leave our flat, to take a minimum of things, 1 suitcase. We were given a room in a small house for my parents, my brother and myself. My grandmother came with us. On the 1st floor, my cousin lived with her parents and her brother, and they also were thrown out of their flat. And they were getting ready the ghetto, but before the ghetto was ready, they told us to leave. And as you know, almost all towns in Poland had a ghetto, usually an area of the town surrounded by a wall or a fence where they would force all the Jews to go, and the conditions became atrocious. But the ghetto wasn't ready, so they gave us this little room for the 4 of us. My auntie, who was the youngest of the 10 children, played an important part in my life. And in fact, she became a bit of a rebel because she got herself a boyfriend at 17, and we were all, well, I didn't know what it meant, but I remember my parents were shocked and everybody. But her boyfriend, who was Jewish, spoke German, and he had the contact among the German soldiers, so she would warn us if they were rounding up people. And the first thing that happened was that she came and said, hide, the Gestapo will be coming within a day or 2. So my parents dug a hole under the wardrobe, and when we heard the Gestapo, my mother, my brother and myself, we hid in that hole. But there was no room for my father and my grandmother, and they hid in the loft of the house. The Gestapo found them. I don't know what happened to my grandmother because I heard her screaming, and they didn't find us hiding. So when it was all quiet, we left the hole. And very soon I asked my mother, what happened to my father? And my mother said, they shot him. So my mother was left with 2 small children, and she had no money. And so when my auntie came again, she asked her to bring, if she could get some food for the children. And she did bring some food. And the next thing, when I saw the Gestapo, was when we were hiding in a sort of kennels, like shed, which was in a courtyard. And I was there with my mother, and I remember holding on looking through the wooden slats, and I was so frightened that I just couldn't look at their faces, at the Gestapo faces, and I just looked at their boots. They always had these shiny black boots, and I used to have the nightmare that for years that the boots were coming and get me. They didn't find us, and very soon we were told to move to the ghetto. And the conditions were absolutely atrocious. My mother very soon became ill. There was typhus, widespread, because typhus is disease. It's a disease of poverty and lack of hygiene. It can be cured, but we didn't have any money. So my uncle, her brother, carried her into the cellar of the building. And the last time I saw my mother, I went down the cellar and she was there, and I don't know, she didn't look at me, she didn't speak to me, and I couldn't understand what was going on. And I became so upset that I just ran out. And very soon my uncle told me that my mother had died. So there were just my brother and I left. And so we always had to be very careful in the ghetto, because they would come, they would round up the people, take them away or shoot them. So we had to think, where do we hide? And eventually my uncle found one family, Polish Catholic family, whom he paid, and they threw me out, and he got another family, Polish family, for my brother and myself. And the daughter of the family, who was about 20, brought one day a German soldier, an armed soldier, and I knew they brought him to kill us, but for some reason, which I cannot understand, he didn't want to kill me. And they killed my brother. He was 7. And they just threw me out. And eventually, after staying with the family, of course I never told anyone I was Jewish. My auntie told me when I was in the ghetto never to tell anyone that I was Jewish. Eventually, I found my way to, because I had with me a name and address of a young Polish Catholic man who was a friend of the family. And I found my way to his office, and he was hiding 13 Jews, and I was the 14th. We were hiding in the loft. They used to go down and they dug a hole under the stable's floor, and one night we all went down that hole. And I stayed in that hole for a year. There was no fresh air, no daylight, very little food. It's very hot living on the ground, but eventually my auntie, who is still alive, she's very old. In fact, I found her today, I spoke to her today, she's 94. She managed to get me some false papers, and then I moved out one night, and I started trying to find a place where I would stay without telling anybody that I was Jewish. So I went to one convent. They threw me out because they said I'm too ill. They didn't want to keep me. I went to Krakow. I found another one, and I wasn't that happy there because I was worried because I didn't know Catholic prayers. And eventually a priest took me in, and I finished up. An elderly couple came, and they said they wanted a girl to help them in the house. I asked them if they would take me, and they said yes. Of course, they didn't know I was Jewish. So I worked for them. They hired me out to work for another family. And they sent me to church. They thought I was a Catholic child. And 6 months after the war, my auntie came to fetch me. And in Poland, there was still a lot of anti-Semitism after the war. And in fact, some survivors who survived, who went back to their houses or flats, were killed by the Poles, and that's as well documented. So we left illegally. We left Poland. We went to France. My aunt, who was still young, put me in a children's home for French Jewish children. So my education is French. My language is French. But then I was 24. I came to England for a few months to improve my English. And I met an Englishman, and I'm still improving my English. I have 2 sons and 2 grandsons, and I love them very much.